Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents From the Realm of a Dying Sun, Volume 1, 4th SS-Panzerkorps and the Battles for Warsaw, July to November 1944, by Douglas E. Nash, Sr., narrated by David de Vries. Publisher's Note: This audiobook refers to maps and figures included in the print and e-book editions of the book. As a former orderly officer of the 4th SS-Panzerkorps, which was composed of volunteers from 11 different European nations, I am pleased that the author is dedicated to understanding the military historical context of this era. He has been very meticulous in his painstaking description of the details. I am particularly touched that Mr. Nash has committed himself to the study of our history and wish his book much success. Gunther Lange, Handelo, Spring 2019. SS Untersturmführer Generalkommando 4. SS-Panzerkorps and Oberstleutnant Dr. der Bundeswehr, Panzerlehr Brigade 9. Introduction. During World War II, the armed or Waffen-SS branch of the Third Reich's dreaded security service expanded from 4 regiments and 20,000 men in 1939 to 38 divisions by the end of the war, eventually growing to a force of over 900,000 men until Germany's defeat in May 1945. Not satisfied with allowing his nascent force to be commanded in combat by traditional corps or army headquarters of the Wehrmacht, Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS, began to create his own SS Corps and army headquarters, starting with the SS-Panzerkorps, soon renumbered as 2nd SS-Panzerkorps in July 1942. As the number of Waffen-SS divisions increased, so did the number of corps headquarters, with 18 corps and 2 armies being planned or activated by the war's end. The histories of the first 3 SS Corps are well known. The actions of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Germanic SS-Panzerkorps and their subordinate divisions, including the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, das Reich, Hitlerjugend, Hohenstaufen, Frundsberg, and Nordland divisions, have been thoroughly documented and publicized. In addition, their leadership rosters include some of the best-known and most notorious commanders and leaders of the Waffen-SS: Paul Hauser, Sepp Dietrich, Felix Steiner, Hermann Vries, Wilhelm Bittrich, Panzer Meyer, Jochen Peiper, Fritz Witt, et al. Their key roles in some of the war's greatest battles, including Kharkov, Kursk, Caen, Falaise, Arnhem, the Ardennes, and Berlin, have been acknowledged and widely studied by students of the art of war and figure prominently in wargaming and battle simulations as well. Overlooked in this pantheon is another SS Corps that never fought in the West or in Berlin, but one that participated in many of the key battles fought on the Eastern Front during the last year of the war, the 4th SS-Panzerkorps. Committed to battle for the first time during the initial stages of the defense of Warsaw in late July 1944, the Corps, consisting of both the 3rd and 5th SS Panzer Divisions, Totenkopf and Wiking respectively, was born in battle and spent the last 10 months of the war in combat, figuring prominently in the battles of Warsaw, the attempted relief of Budapest, Operation Spring Awakening, the defense of Vienna, and the withdrawal into Austria, where it finally surrendered to U.S. forces in May 1945. Though perhaps not as glamorous as the other 3 aforementioned corps, Herbert Otto Giller's 4th SS Panzerkorps was renowned for its tenacity, high morale, and above all, its lethality, whether conducting a hard-hitting counterattack or a stubborn defense in situations where its divisions were hopelessly outnumbered. Often embroiled in heated disputes with its immediate Wehrmacht higher headquarters over his seemingly cavalier conduct of operations, Giller's corps remained to the bitter end one of the Third Reich's most reliable and formidable field formations. The Corps as a modern military concept traces its origins to the middle of the 18th century, when European armies had expanded in size to a point where field armies, unwieldy formations consisting of dozens of regiments had become too difficult to command by one man alone. With large standing armies becoming the norm, even after wars had ceased, the administration and control of large and usually geographically dispersed bodies of troops had to be distributed among subordinate commanders to ensure that armies could function efficiently and effectively. With the advent of mass citizen armies during the wars of the French Revolution and Napoleonic era, the Corps, as a body of troops, had evolved to the point where it usually consisted of 2 or more infantry divisions, a cavalry element, supporting artillery regiments, and so forth, as well as supporting logistics, engineer, and signal organizations, ranging in size between 10,000 and 50,000 men. Miniature armies in themselves, the named or numbered corps of the early to mid-19th century could operate nearly independently of one another, yet were able to mass in time and space at the direction of their higher command. In the case of a corps, this usually meant a field army. With the advent of the telegraph, followed by the telephone and radio, the control of the corps was greatly enhanced, allowing the corps commander to lead and direct his subordinate divisions, brigades, and regiments in ways that Frederick the Great and Napoleon could only dream of. Just as important a development as the corps was that of the corps staff. Evolving alongside the corps itself, the corps headquarters by the end of the 19th century had become a specialized staff that could not only exercise the will of its leader through his ability to command, but more importantly, could control the actions of its subordinate units to ensure that they conformed to his will. Though generations of division commanders may decry the corps headquarters as being overly meddlesome and demanding, the advent of the modern corps made the armies of Europe and the United States, including those of the Confederacy during the American Civil War, more efficient in fighting battles, though not always effectively. To increase the ability of the division, corps, and army-level staffs, European, American, and, during the late 19th century, Asian armies instituted general staff schools that sought to select and groom prospective officers who would become, in effect, the brains of their armed forces' general staffs. To increase the capability of staffs to assist commanders with leading and controlling their organizations, they became more specialized, organizing themselves into separate departments responsible for personnel, intelligence, operations, and logistics, as well as many other less important but still vital specialized areas, such as military law or veterinary services. Introduction of the telegraph, landline telephones, and radio required the establishment of specialized organizations that existed solely for supporting the needs of the commander and his staff, such as signal battalions, military police companies, motor transport columns, and, last but certainly not least, the Corps Headquarters Support Battalion, which provides the administrative, logistical, and security support for the headquarters. The Prussian Greater General Staff, as it was developed under the tutelage of Generals Karl von Clausewitz and Gerd von Scharnhorst, became the epitome of the modern General Staff by the mid-19th century. Britain, France, America, and other countries were quick to adopt similar organizations, especially after the spectacularly successful 1870 Prussian campaign against France. It was under the guidance of such organizations that the modern wars of the 20th century were waged, whether commanding and controlling battles and engagement, tactics, by divisions and corps, wide-ranging operations carried out by armies designed to connect battles and engagements in time and space towards achieving a certain goal, or a theater-level strategy designed for an army group or several army groups to achieve the overall goals of a given conflict. Staffs in their basic organization have changed little despite the advent of modern command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence gathering C4I technology, with today's division, corps, and army staffs remaining remarkably similar to those of 100 years ago. Surprisingly, there has been very little written about the roles of staffs in wartime, with most of the historical treatment focusing on divisions, regiments, battalions, and companies. Leading personalities have also received their due, but most biographies, or autobiographies for that matter, choose to elaborate on battles lost and won, bold maneuvers, or political intrigues between the generals, their political overlords, and their opposing numbers. The listener is challenged to find anything that covers the activities of the staffs concerned, where, working in obscurity and with limited time, they are responsible for translating the thoughts and intents of their great captains into orders and directives that guide the actual divisions, corps, or armies under their command and enable the battle once joined to be controlled in some manner to ensure that the leader's intent is achieved. While the activities of American and British staffs of World War II are well documented and preserved, at least in their own formal command histories or chronologies, the staff histories of the German army of that period, the Wehrmacht, have a checkered past. Not only did Germany lose the war, but unlike previous wars that Germany had won or lost, the institutions of the Wehrmacht did not survive the war. Its Generalstab, General Staff, as well as the Luftwaffe, Heer, and Kriegsmarine were disbanded, the Waffen-SS labeled a criminal organization, Germany split between the two Cold War-era factions, and a 10-year hiatus ensued that would last until 1955. That year, West Germany, quickly followed by East Germany, was finally allowed to establish its own federal armed forces, the Bundeswehr, which deliberately chose, on account of the stain of National Socialism, not to tie itself to the traditions of the past. More importantly, from a historian's viewpoint, many unit war diaries, operational records, and histories covering the period after 1943 were destroyed during the war, especially when RAF Bomber Command destroyed the troop barracks and facilities housing the German Army's Military History Department in Potsdam in February 1945. Though many records survived and were spirited away to the United States or Great Britain shortly after the war for analysis, the remainder was confiscated by the Soviet Union. While the United States National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, returned most of their records to the West German Bundesarchiv in the 1960s and 1970s after they had been copied on microfilm, the bulk of the records in the Soviet, now Russian Army archives, were kept under lock and key, with accessibility tightly controlled until only recently. The records of the Armed SS, or Waffen-SS, are a case in point. Though not technically part of the Wehrmacht, the Waffen-SS was organized in almost mirror fashion, including the staffs at all levels, though the staff of Heinrich Himmler's SS Führungshauptamt, SS FHA, or Main SS Leadership Office, itself is another matter entirely and will not be covered in this work. Many Waffen-SS leaders had begun their careers as officers in the Heer, Army, and some had even completed General Staff officer training. Many others came from the police, Ordnungspolizei, where they had similar training. So as the Waffen-SS began to expand in 1942 to include the creation of its own corps headquarters, it made sense to copy Heer organizational doctrine down to the names and departments of each individual staff section. After all, the organizational doctrine was sound, was understood by most of the Waffen-SS key leaders, and would enable the future divisions and corps of the Waffen-SS to seamlessly integrate into field armies of the Heer. Additionally, promising young SS officers were sent to the Heer's General Staff Officer course beginning in early 1940, where they would receive the necessary specialty training to allow them to function as General Staff officers in SS divisions, corps, and later armies. There were never enough of these men available to fill the demand, though, since the Waffen-SS was expanding faster than they could be trained. In turn, the Waffen-SS resorted to requesting qualified Heer General Staff officers be seconded or loaned to the Waffen-SS to fill this shortage, and based on the records of the 22 men who were given this assignment, most of them seem to have been qualified for their positions and performed their duties admirably. In some cases, so great was the shortage of qualified General Staff officers that several SS Corps organized in 1944 or 1945 were predominantly staffed by Heer personnel, who were not required to transfer to the Waffen-SS or even wear SS uniforms. With the war's end approaching and defeat staring them in the face, the German Armed Forces High Command, or Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, directed in late April 1945 that before capitulating, units in the field were to destroy all of their records, by burning if possible. While many Heer units failed to comply with this directive, thankfully leaving their historical records for posterity, most Waffen-SS units, ranging from battalion to Field Army headquarters, obeyed their orders to the letter. Few operational records of the Waffen-SS thus survived the war, making any attempt to chronicle the history of Waffen-SS Corps headquarters problematic. As previously mentioned, a large amount of Heer operational records did survive, and those of Corps and Field Armies with attached SS units are most instructive, offering a glimpse into the inner workings and deliberations of the Waffen-SS, at least in regards to daily reports, situation reports, and message traffic. However, any prospective writer must first be aware of which Heer Corps and Field Armies Waffen-SS divisions or corps were attached to throughout the war, a daunting task for the uninitiated. The history of the 4th SS-Panzerkorps is a case in point. Committed to battle as an operational field headquarters in July 1944, its staff officers kept a daily record of its activities in its Kriegstagebuch, a combat journal that captured everything of interest that occurred until the Corps' demise in May 1945. A Kriegstagebuch, otherwise known as the KTB, not only recorded the daily events, but in most cases, separate versions were kept by each of the major staff elements. For example, the first Generalstabsoffizier, First General Staff Officer, or 1A, maintained the 1A Kriegstagebuch. The second and third General Staff Officers usually maintained their own logistics and intelligence KTBs as well. So depending on their particular staff section's responsibilities, whether operations, 1A, intelligence, 1C, or logistics, 1B, each respective KTB would have reports, message traffic, records of supply requisitions, personnel records, etc. contained therein, including annexes or appendices as appropriate. This amounted to a voluminous amount of records that were updated daily. Each year, a division, corps, field army, or army group was required to bundle up their previous year's documents and send them to Potsdam for storage and safekeeping, to be used after Germany won the war to write the official histories. For the Waffen-SS, instead of Potsdam, by late 1944, these records were being sent to the SS Kriegsarchiv, located in a castle in Sasmuk, a small village in the Kolin district in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, nowadays a region of the Czech Republic. Most of these records were destroyed either deliberately on orders by its director, SS Obersturmbannführer Albin Scherhofer, or during the fighting at the end of April 1945. Only a small number were saved and are presently archived in Prague. The records of the 4th SS-Panzerkorps were destroyed deliberately in May 1945, shortly before its surrender to the Americans, on the order of its commander, SS Obergruppenführer und Generalleutnant der Waffen-SS Herbert Otto Giller. Thus, reconstructing what occurred during the Corps' brief life proved to be a challenge in regards to its official documents. But fortunately, there was an abundance of primary Heer sources, contemporary eyewitness accounts, post-war recollections, and publications produced by the various veterans' organizations of divisions assigned to the Corps. Of particular interest were the morning and evening situation reports that were submitted to the Field Army headquarters that commanded Giller's Corps. In this case, all of the daily Morgenmeldung, Vororientierung und Tagesmeldung, morning, midday, and daily reports, have been preserved in the files for the 2nd Armee and 9th Armee, under which the 4th SS Panzerkorps served from 27 July 1944 until 25 November 1944. These reports, submitted under Giller's direct supervision and in his name, contain a wealth of information about daily events, including accounts describing the outcome of combat operations. Another important record was the evening commander's commentary, maintained by the Army commanders, which usually included contributions by their chiefs of staff found in each field army's Führungsabteilung war diary. These particular records shed light on the thoughts and plans of senior leaders, which are not usually reflected in the operational records. Another useful source that has only become recently available is the archive of German documents captured by the Red Army at the end of the war. This enormous collection of documents is still being processed and slowly added to a website established by the Russian-German Project on Digitization of German Documents in the archives of the Russian Federation. To date, 2019, the consortium has added thousands of previously unseen captured German documents from nearly every command level of the Wehrmacht, ranging from the OKW to Heeresgruppen, Army Groups level, then Armee Oberkommando, field armies, and as far down as division, regiment, and even battalion level. The author has sifted through this gigantic hoard of online documentation and was able to access a wealth of information that directly concerned the 4th SS-Panzerkorps, as well as its higher headquarters and subordinate units. In fact, the need to incorporate this information into the manuscript led to delays in this book's publication, but it could not have gone to press without it. A byproduct of years of research in the archives of the former Soviet Union is Colonel David M. Glantz's excellent Atlas of the Lublin-Brest Operation and the Advance on Warsaw. Working with cartographer Michael Avancini, Colonel Glantz used copies of contemporary maps produced by the First Belarusian Front found in the Russian archives, as well as those used by the German 2nd and 9th Armeen, to produce a day-by-day visual account of the fighting that took place between 18 July and 30 September 1944. In addition to depicting the location of the 4th SS Panzerkorps at any given point, it also names the Red Army and Polish Army units, ranging in size from army to regiment, as well as the direction of their advance. This proved to be an invaluable guide, which allowed the author to identify which units were fighting opposite the Germans as the campaign progressed through the tank battle of Praga, the 3 battles of Warsaw, the Warsaw Uprising, and the siege of Modlin. Though not included in the German documents in the Russia website, of particular usefulness were the monthly readiness accounts submitted by divisions under the Corps' command to the German Army's Inspectorate of Panzer Troops, detailing personnel status, available tank numbers, serviceable artillery pieces, and, interestingly, the narrative account provided by each division commander describing his overall assessment of the combat worthiness of his division. In addition, there are a plethora of daily situation reports and other message traffic that circulated between the Corps and the 3 field armies under which 4th SS Panzerkorps served between July 1944 and May 1945. Another equally useful source are the daily armor strength reports that each corps was required to submit to its Army headquarters, as well as the weekly personnel strength reports in which every division operating under a corps or field army headquarters was required to submit a tally of their Kampfstärke, that is, the effective combat strength of each battalion measured in terms of available infantrymen, combat engineers, and reconnaissance troops, in short, the foot soldiers who did most of the fighting and dying, and whose numbers helped commanders understand the relative combat power of their organizations at a given point in time. Another source that must be mentioned is the magisterial Germany and the Second World War, the official German government account of the war written by a consortium of historians under the supervision of the Militärgeschichtliches Forschungsamt, Research Institute for German History in Potsdam. Edited by noted military historian Karl-Heinz Vries, this is undoubtedly the most complete and comprehensive account of the war from the German perspective ever written. Volume 8 of the series, The Eastern Front, 1943 to 1944, The War in the East and on the Neighboring Fronts, 2017, was used as a reference for this book, which provides an illuminating overview of operations from the perspective of the OKW and Heeresgruppen, army groups, accompanied by an excellent series of maps that clearly depict the unfolding operations. It should be mandatory listening for anyone attempting to understand the ebb and flow of the fighting during those 2 critical years. While this is the first attempt to chronicle the history of 4th SS Panzer Corps, 3 previously established SS Panzer Corps have already had their accounts entered into the historical record. Major General Michael F. Reynolds, a highly decorated officer of the British Army, has published 2 meticulously researched books about the 1st and 2nd SS Panzer Corps, titled respectively Men of Steel, the Ardennes and Eastern Front, and Sons of the Reich, 2nd Panzer Corps, Normandy, Arnhem, Ardennes, Eastern Front. He also authored the definitive history of the 1st SS Panzer Corps' experience in Normandy during the Allied invasion, Steel Inferno, 1st SS Panzer Corps in Normandy, as well as another about Jochen Peiper, one of the 1st SS Panzer Division's most notorious commanders, the Devil's adjutant, Jochen Peiper, Panzer leader. Told from the perspective of these 2 corps and their most prominent commanders, he provides extremely detailed and coherent accounts of their important contributions towards the German effort to hold the Allies at bay in Western Europe from D-Day until the failure of the Ardennes offensive, followed by a brief account of their commitment to battle in Hungary and Austria during the last 2 months of the war. Wilhelm Tieck, a Waffen-SS veteran and noted historian in his own right, also wrote a very fine history of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps in the firestorm of the last years of the war. 2nd SS Panzer Corps with the 9th and 10th SS Divisions, Hohenstaufen and Frundsberg. The English translation by J.J. Fedorowicz Publishing of a work that originally appeared in Germany, this account has the added advantage of having an insider's view of how the Corps operated, augmented by personal accounts by many of his Waffen-SS acquaintances with whom he served during the war. Concerned that another famous SS Corps, the 3rd, Germanic Panzer Corps, might be omitted by the historical record, Tieck also penned The Tragedy of the Faithful, 3rd SS Panzer Corps. Another excellent account of this corps has also recently been published, 3rd Germanic SS Panzer Corps, The History of Himmler's Favorite SS Panzer Corps, 1943 to 1945, Volume 1, by Lennart Westberg, Peter Schalander, and Gaia Brendan, Helion, 2019. What these publications demonstrate is the continuing fascination by a significant number of military historians in this topic, and studies of other SS Corps would help shed light on this late-war phenomenon. The last-mentioned corps, established by and led for most of its 2-year life by SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner, was an attempt to incorporate all of the Germanic SS units consisting of Northern European volunteers into an international Panzer Corps. Steiner, an advocate of physical fitness and stormtrooper tactics, was a Heer veteran of World War I and instructor par excellence, who is credited with having much to do with the early Waffen-SS reputation as being an elite body of troops. Although his corps fought for its entire existence on the Eastern Front, the 3rd Germanic SS Panzer Corps' most remarkable episode occurred during the Battle of Berlin, when Steiner famously refused to commit the corps, renamed Armee Abteilung Steiner, or Army Detachment Steiner, to come to Hitler's assistance on 22 April 1945, when he knew it would lead only to the senseless slaughter of his men. Steiner also wrote 2 books after the war, describing his experiences as a regimental, division, corps, and army commander, titled Der Freiwilligen, The Volunteers, and Armee der Geächteten, Army of Outlaws. Though neither dealt exclusively with his 3rd Germanic SS Panzer Corps, Steiner does describe its operations in great detail, though with a certain degree of embellishment to further the cause of Waffen-SS historical rehabilitation. Sadly, he makes little reference to Giller's 4th SS-Panzerkorps, though Steiner does highlight the complexities of commanding units consisting predominantly of foreign volunteers. Any objection?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?